Okay, so yesterday we did the video concerning the top 10 most valuable sports teams in the US. Today's video, we're going north of the border to Canada, and we're looking at the top 12 most valuable sports teams north of the border in Canada. Now, what is interesting is there are some surprises on this list. There are some teams lower than I thought they would be, and some teams higher than I thought they would be. But it's a very interesting snapshot of the current finances as of August the 8th this year, current financial valuations of Canadian sport. Now, the reason why it's a 12 team list rather than 10 is I went on Daily Hive, which is a website which has listings of a variety of sports listings and sports articles, and they obviously did their list of the top 12, which we'll accept. So there are some interesting positions on this list of teams, but then you've got to look at who's on the team, the location they're in, their success or their failures, and the fact that one of these teams has recently been going through the process of a sale as well. So yesterday with the Washington Commanders, formerly the Redskins, they're going through the sale process from Dan Schneider to James Harris, I believe his name is. The Ottawa Senators from the Melnyk family to new ownership as well. So let's break it down. So in 12th place is CF Montreal, valued at $390 million. They're in the MLS. And I am surprised that the MLS does make this list and that the CFL doesn't. So the MLS is starting to, but $390 million, that's not a bad valuation. That's actually more than some NHL teams. So the MLS is definitely growing in importance. In 11th is the Vancouver Whitecaps at $415 million. That's also an MLS team. So the MLS values have really grown rapidly over the last decade. Now the Ottawa Senators, now yes, they are going through a takeover buyout process from the Melnyk family to new ownership. They're valued at $655 million. So a bit surprising that the Senators are as low as that, considering that obviously the NHL is the most popular league in Canada. Ice hockey is the most popular sport in Canada. But the NHL, while all the values are growing in the Canadian markets, they're growing at a slower rate than the NBA, Major League Baseball, and MLS. Their growth rates are higher financially. Above them is Toronto FC. So an MLS team is worth more than an NHL team. They're valued at $705 million. Toronto dominates this list as a sporting location, so they are more valuable than an NHL franchise. In fact, the Toronto FC MLS franchise is more valuable than a lot of NHL franchises. I'm just putting that out there. Now we get a cluster of NHL teams. The Winnipeg Jets come in at $805 million. They're in 8th, and the Calgary Flames in 7th at $870 million. Obviously, Winnipeg and Calgary, they're in the Western Conference. Regular playoff teams, but they haven't had success. Calgary last won the Stanley Cup in 1989, and these are two teams that are currently going through transition on the ice. But Winnipeg, they regularly sell out, so ticket sales are quite strong, merchandise sales are quite strong, and they've got a couple of real big superstar players in the league that have played or are currently on their roster. Calgary, same thing. The issue with Calgary is the Saddledome and their future of the Saddledome. So there are arena issues with Calgary. Winnipeg does have the smallest NHL arena. That's what holds their value down a little bit in comparison to some of the other NHL teams on this list, because the Vancouver Canucks, who can't win anything, that is a franchise of failure, they're worth $1 billion. $1 billion for a team that is the worst Canadian team quite regularly. Ottawa notwithstanding, but Vancouver is not a very well run team. Vancouver fans will tell you that the Canucks are a bit of a tyre fire at times, but they're still worth $1 billion and they're not successful. But because of that arena stability and that arena size, and of course Vancouver. Vancouver is a massive metro area, very highly densely populated metro area. So I'm not surprised that Vancouver, the Canucks, are higher up than the Flames and the Jets, but I am a little bit surprised at their valuation. But there we go. The Edmonton Oilers is currently valued at $1.29 billion. That star player power and a brand new arena will help. So assets, be it team assets or infrastructure assets, do help the Oilers shoot up the list. There was a period of time where they were thinking of relocating the Oilers. The team wasn't making much money and was struggling. New arena and some high-profile players like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who've signed long-term there, will help the value of your team when you've got marketable assets that you can sell merchandise. So some of the best players in the league there. Montreal Canadiens, 1.7 billion. Well, it's the Montreal Canadiens, the most successful team. Stanley Cup history. The last Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup. Recently been to a Stanley Cup final, and it's Montreal. It is almost a religion in Montreal to support the Canadiens. Now we get Toronto dominating the listing now. But all four Toronto teams, by the way, are owned by the same organisation, I think. So you've got the Blue Jays. They're valued at 1.97 billion. That's the only Major League Baseball team currently in Canada, and that's been the case for a long time. They come in at third. The Maple Leafs is what surprises me, coming in at second at 2.12 billion. The NHL, one of the biggest fan bases. Toronto is the biggest metro area in Canada and one of the biggest metro areas in North America. So you can see part of the reason why Toronto does dominate this list. But the Maple Leafs coming in at second and the Canadiens coming in at fourth is the surprise for me, because the Toronto Raptors are valued at 3.34 billion. Now, yes, the Maple Leafs regularly sell out. Obviously, they've got some star players. Lack of success, obviously, is a big thing. The Raptors have recently been a successful team, winning the NBA championships not that long ago, but 3.34 billion. If you looked at the US list, some of the NBA franchises were worth a lot of money, a lot more than the Raptors, and the Raptors are a good side, and they come in at 3.34 billion. So yes, there is an impact of the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar, and economics a little bit. Taxes as well are higher in Canada than the US. That has an impact on pre and post tax revenues and profits. Toronto has four teams on this list. That's a quarter. No, is it a third? It's a third of all teams in the top 12. The top 12 of Canada for valuation are in Toronto. That's massive. Another big interesting thing is the CFL doesn't get a team on this list. The CFL. The CFL as a league is not as valuable as it used to be. The teams aren't as valuable in real terms as they used to be. If I did this list 20 years ago, if I was 20 years old and YouTube existed 20 years ago and I was to do this list, the CFL would probably feature on this list. Winnipeg, the Jets, weren't a team then. They were in Atlanta. And the MLS hadn't expanded at the same rate it has now. So the MLS teams were valued at a lesser value. And I would have thought the CFL teams would have been competing with the NHL teams for valuation. But the NBA values have gone up massively in recent times. Major League Baseball, even though it has its financial issues and imbalances, that's a license to print money. The NHL, while profits are growing, and most teams now turn a profit most years, and their values have increased, they are increasing at a slower rate than the NBA and Major League Baseball. The MLS, their values have rapidly increased with expansion fees and more gate receipts, more merchandise, better TV deals. So the MLS is massively increased in value as well. But that's the Canadian list. Are you surprised by where teams finish on this list as of August the 8th? So this was only recently posted on dailyhive.com, which is where I got this information from. Are you surprised by the positions of some of these teams on the list? The fact that the Toronto metro area and teams in Toronto dominate this list, what does surprise you? I mean, all the top three are all in Toronto. That's a quarter of the list. A third of the list in total are Toronto-based teams. Are you surprised that an MLS team is worth more than an NHL team? Are you surprised that an NHL team isn't the most valuable on this list? So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below, and I will have some more content for you very, very soon.